Okay. So like I said, my name is Eli Glazier, and I'm the project manager for the county's pedestrian master plan. I work in the Montgomery Planning Department, and I'm really excited to speak to you today about the pedestrian master plan with a particular emphasis on our draft policy, design, and programming recommendations. I just wanted to let you know that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website tomorrow. So if you have any friends or neighbors who weren't able to attend, they'll be able to review the presentation itself and watch the recording tomorrow. I'm joined today by several colleagues. Jason Sartori is the division chief for countywide planning and policy. So he's in charge of really the big countywide plans like the pedestrian plan and the bicycle master plan. David Ansbacher is a multimodal transportation planning supervisor. Lily Mernon is a transportation planner in countywide planning and policy. And then Tanya Stern is the deputy planning director for Montgomery Planning. So if you have a question during the presentation, I think you probably have all noticed by now that you can't share your video and you can't use audio. If you have a question during the presentation, please post it in the chat, and my colleagues may be able to answer it. And if not, or we think it's best sort of for the end in a larger discussion, I'll be answering questions from the chat at the end as well. So with that, we'll dive right into the presentation. The roadmap for today really looks like this. Why are we doing a pedestrian master plan? What is the plan's goals, how far along we are, the types of recommendations that will be in this plan, the policy, design, and programming recommendations themselves, our newly published pedestrian prioritization tool, and then a plan timeline moving forward and next steps. So why we're doing this, I think specifically this plan was called for in the county's first Vision Zero action plan in 2017. Vision Zero is the philosophy that traffic fatalities and severe injuries are preventable using a systematic approach to change culture and change infrastructure to ensure that individual mistakes that people make in our transportation system are not fatal and don't lead to severe injuries. So part of that is the understanding that pedestrians are really disproportionately likely to be the ones seriously injured or killed on our roads. So developing a master plan that really understands the baseline conditions for pedestrians in the county and then makes recommendations about how to improve those conditions is really essential to achieving our Vision Zero goal as a county. And in addition to safety, obviously, there are a lot of other benefits to improving pedestrian conditions and getting more people walking and rolling, including public health, economic, climate, and equity. This plan will really make walking and rolling safer, more comfortable, more convenient, and more accessible for pedestrians of all ages and abilities all across the county. I think the idea here is that all trips within a short distance should realistically be pedestrian trips. So the idea is not that everyone should walk for the shorter quarter-mile trips to the grocery store or the post office or what have you, just that walking should really be a viable option. And we know in a lot of the county today, that's really not the case. So there should be connecting sidewalks. There should be appropriate separation from the street. There should be places to safely cross intersections. This plan is really about providing more transportation options for people across the county. This is right from the approved scope of work for the plan, but the idea with this plan is to strengthen the existing culture of walking and expand it by prioritizing pedestrian infrastructure and recommending updates to county policies, operational practices, and design standards. So to date, what we've done essentially is use public engagement to bring to light common issues, collect data on existing conditions to further identify challenges that people face in the pedestrian environment, and then develop recommendations to address the issues raised. So as part of this process, we've identified 4 main goals of the plan. The first is to increase walking and pedestrian satisfaction. The second is to create this comfortable, connected, convenient pedestrian network. The third is to enhance pedestrian safety. And the fourth is to really do all of these things in an equitable and just way. So to date, I mentioned this, we began our public engagement for this plan way back before COVID in September 2019. We collected a lot of existing conditions data that we published and shared with the public and the planning board in March 2022 of this year. As part of that report, we did a lot of really unique data collection to really understand pedestrian conditions. And some of those unique elements include a countywide pedestrian level of comfort analysis, which estimated pedestrian comfort on every single sidewalk, street, trail in Montgomery County using things like sidewalk width, the speed limit, the number of lanes you have to cross, if there's a marked crosswalk, etc. From this data, we are able to provide some insights into areas of the county that are more comfortable for pedestrians and areas of the county that are less comfortable. We also coordinated with Montgomery County Public Schools in late 2019 on a student travel tally to understand how students arrive to and depart from school. We looked at pedestrian crashes from 2015 to 2020 to better understand where these crashes are happening and under what circumstances. And then we also conducted a statistically valid countywide survey, sending postcards with a unique survey link to 60,000 randomly selected households countywide to get insights into the pedestrian experience, including reasons for walking, walk frequency, and the satisfaction that people have with different elements of the pedestrian environment. All of this data came together in the existing conditions report, which Dave has posted a link to in the comments. The public engagement we've done and the existing conditions report have really provided us a great foundation of knowledge about the pedestrian issues that need to be addressed. And our recommendation development, which is ongoing, is our effort to guide the county in addressing those issues as we move forward. So the recommendations included in this plan, first, the recommendations we're mainly here to discuss today, these design, policy, and programming recommendations. Second, we'll be using data to prioritize locations, prioritize where in the county future pedestrian improvements like new sidewalks, safer crossings, and reimagined intersections should go in a data-driven way with an emphasis on equity, safety, and connectivity. Third, pedestrian shortcut locations. We're really well aware that in Montgomery County, sidewalks and trails may not provide the most direct path between where you are and where you want to go. So over time, people have created dirt or gravel paths to make these direct connections possible. We've been collecting these pedestrian shortcuts, goat paths, desire lines, whatever you tend to call them, and we'll be making recommendations in this plan about where these connections should be improved, should be made accessible, so people of all ages and abilities can really take these shortest paths safely. In addition to those recommendations, we'll also be making recommendations about where side paths, which are shared bicycle and pedestrian pathways, should be built along some of the roads in the more rural parts of the county, and making some required clarifications to how different parts of the county are categorized in our Complete Streets Design Guide, which is a collaborative document between the Planning Department and Montgomery County Department of Transportation that will really guide the reimagination of our streets in the years ahead. So today, like I said, I'm mainly here to talk about the design, policy, and programming recommendations, which are those high-level recommendations that, if implemented today, wouldn't necessarily change the county into a more pedestrian-friendly place in the very short term, but as sidewalks are built, as intersections are reimagined, as routine maintenance is completed, and new lighting is installed, Montgomery County will be remade for the better for pedestrians in a really systemic way. So these recommendations, there's about 34 high-level recommendations broken into 6 themes. The themes are pretty straightforward. They're active themes. So build is about building things. Maintain is about ensuring what we've built remains usable for people for years to come. Protect is about improving pedestrian safety. Expand access is a suite of recommendations about improving accessibility for people with disabilities. monitor is a set of recommendations to keep us as a planning department and a county honest in making progress on the plan implementation and being transparent about the progress that we're making. And then lastly, fund. We have underinvested in sidewalks and pedestrian safety for decades. And this set of recommendations really lays out that we need to be creative in ways to make up that deficit. So within these 6 themes, like I said, there are 34 high-level recommendations and 94 key actions that, when implemented, will achieve the recommendations' intent. Now I'm going to walk through the recommendations in each theme, skipping around and explaining a few from each before moving on. At the end, we can definitely go back and dive deeper into some of the specific recommendations and key actions. So if you're interested in a specific recommendation, feel free to post that recommendation in the chat, and we can sort of circle back to it at the end and dive a bit deeper. So first, these are the build recommendations. You can take a look. Some of the higher level recommendations here. B1, build more sidewalks faster. Using a data-driven rather than a reactive process to build sidewalks, so sidewalks can be built where they're needed and local knowledge can be used to make them appropriate for the context. B5 is light pathways and crossings. One of the top things we heard from people at meetings and through the countywide survey was really the need for improved lighting. This recommendation seeks to update design lighting standards for lighting along pedestrian pathways and at crossings so people can see and be seen. And then I think another really big one from this set of recommendations is B10, which recommends we start the process of assuming county control of state highways. And this is a big one. What we've seen is that the state roads in Montgomery County are the ones that tend to have the destinations that pedestrians want to access, but at the same time, they are the ones that tend to be the most dangerous and uncomfortable for people walking. And that tension is really at the heart of this plan to try and figure out ways to make those connections safer. And what this recommendation seeks to do is really start the conversation to move these state highways in our downtowns, in our town centers, and along our bus rapid transit corridors under county control. So we really have more flexibility in how they can be redesigned to improve pedestrian safety and transit access. So having roads like Georgia Avenue in downtown Silver Spring, Flower Avenue, et cetera, under county control would really give the county more flexibility in design and also provide more local accountability to improve safety along these roads. The next set of recommendations, well, if you have any other recommendations you'd like to dive into, including talking about the key actions, again, please feel free to post that in the chat. The next set of recommendations is maintain. These are basically, MA1 is about creating a county sidewalk inspection and repair approach that really proactively assesses all sidewalks countywide on a rotating basis, one part of the county per year, and then improves and repairs sidewalks based on those assessment findings. Being more proactive will allow the county to repair sidewalks before they completely deteriorate, which allows for cheaper repairs over time and a better pedestrian experience across the county. MA2 is a suite of recommendations about improving how our sidewalks are kept clear of snow, trash receptacles, and vegetation. And then MA3 is about using utility construction efforts as opportunities for sidewalks to be restriped and to install other types of pavement markings. The protect recommendations, a really big recommendation here is about grappling with an important element of the pedestrian safety crisis we're currently in, which is large vehicles that have really poor pedestrian visibility, so namely tall trucks and SUVs. P1 includes recommendations for the county to lead by example by not buying these types of vehicles with demonstrated pedestrian safety issues and installing speed governors on county vehicles. In addition, there are recommendations to create a new tier of driver's licenses for vehicles with these demonstrated pedestrian safety issues so that we can provide the necessary education as well as a new non-punitive education component of the driver's license renewal process, so drivers can really get up to date on changes to traffic laws and other things that have changed since their last license renewal. P6, making the walk to school safer, includes recommendations about providing more crossing guards for schools, improving street crossings near schools, and reimagining the Safe Routes to School program countywide so parents feel more comfortable having their kids walk to school. Expand access. This is the accessibility theme. The low-hanging fruit here is really EA1, making sure sidewalks and other surfaces are smooth and safe to walk and roll on, particularly our brick sidewalks. This is a complaint, an issue that has been raised by members of the disability community that we've spoken with, and people really of all ages and abilities using strollers and other mobility devices to get around. This is really sort of a baseline necessity for people moving around the county. EA2 is about getting utility poles and other things like traffic signal boxes out of our sidewalks so there's more space to walk and roll. EA3 is about making sure there's enough time for people who walk slowly, those seniors and younger people and those with mobility issues to cross our streets. EA4 is about making sure the pedestrian push buttons, which help guide people with low or no vision across the street safely, are located in places that these groups can actually use them. And then EA5 recommends implementing a more robust type of wayfinding for people with low or no vision so everyone can safely and directly navigate around the pedestrian environment. Like I said earlier, these monitor recommendations are really about improving transparency and accountability on the pedestrian master plan and pedestrian issues as a whole. And then the funding recommendations, I think we've recommended here some revenue sources, which could include market price parking fees and automated traffic enforcement fines, among others, like potentially increased vehicle registration fees for vehicles that have demonstrated safety issues. So those are all of the categories of the recommendations, and I know I've gone through them quickly. I'm going to go through a couple more things, and then we can jump back into that discussion if people have specific recommendations they'd like to get into. So the bulk of the original impetus for this meeting and this presentation was these high-level design policy and programming recommendations. But a couple of days ago, we released a tool that to allow members of the community to weigh in on how to prioritize parts of the county for pedestrian improvements in a data-driven way. So I want to take the opportunity to dive into that and discuss that a little bit. So essentially what we've done is, what we'd like to do in this plan is create a data-driven approach for prioritizing where pedestrian pathways and improved crossings and things like that are constructed. While ultimately the plan will have a prioritization approach, we'd like the community to weigh in and provide your perspective as well. So I'm going to share what we're trying to do now, but essentially there's a list, there's 10 factors. We'd like members of the community to assign how important each factor is, to essentially spend 100 points between those 10 factors, assigning more points to the factors that are the most important to you. And then there's an accompanying map that if you click visualize, it shows you with the darker parts of the county. The darker parts of the county are the ones that would be a higher priority using your prioritization approach. And then you can feel free to make changes to that approach. And then there's a survey where you can submit that approach and share that with the planning department. And we will be reviewing all of the prioritization approaches that we receive as we work to develop the department's planning approach. I'm going to share what this looks like, and maybe somebody from my staff can tell me if it's loading correctly. Can you see the browser? Anyone?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Okay, great. Okay, so in this instance, so So there's a whole website which Dave posted in the chat that explains what we're trying to do, how to use the tool, explains where these prioritization factors, these variables came from, and how the data was collected. But I'm just going to show sort of the map at this point, but feel free to explore in the link Dave provided. Essentially, what I've done here on the right side is assign equal weight to all of the variables. So 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. The weight has to add up to 100. And then what you can do is you can visualize where this sort of approach would seek to target investments in the future. And what we see is sort of a quote unquote balanced approach like this. There's weight in Bethesda, Silver Spring, Long Branch, Glenmont, or Wheaton, Glenmont, Aspen Hill, and then parts of sort of the vicinity around Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village, and Germantown. So if you zoom in, you can see like more specifically where these areas are. And then, like I said, if you want to see how tweaking that prioritization approach would lead to a different outcome, you can do that as well. And then you can submit your prioritization to us with ideally your name, your email, your zip code, and any additional sort of contextual or clarifying comments that you think are important. And then you can share that with us. So that's a document, that's a tool that's going to be live for the next probably until mid-October. And at that point, we'll have to, as part of this plan, identify a preferred prioritization. So I would really encourage you to do that. And then almost done, I swear, and then we can get into it. We really want your feedback and the feedback of your neighbors and community members on both the pedestrian prioritization tool, but then also the larger policy and programming recommendations. So definitely check out our website or check out the links that Dave shared in the chat. You can review all of the recommendations and key actions. You can share your priorities using the pedestrian prioritization tool. The timeline moving ahead, we've been doing community engagement around these recommendations for the past 2 months, and we continue to do that. We're presenting these draft recommendations for the planning board to weigh in on September 22nd. We have an in-person meeting, which will largely be the same content as what was discussed today on the September 13th at our Wheaton headquarters in the auditorium. I'm going to be writing the draft plan for the draft pedestrian master plan as a whole, which the recommendations are a part, in the next starting actually really soon for the non-recommendation parts. And then that planning and editing process will continue into December. And then we look forward to starting work sessions with the planning board, which will include a public hearing in early 2023. So after the planning board work sessions and approval by the planning board in that time period, we'll be going through a similar process with the county council in mid-2023. So I think with that, if anyone has any questions, or I can answer any questions that were in the chat, or anyone wants to dive more specifically into one of these recommendations on the screen, I'm happy to do that.
Eli, April had her hand up for quite a while. She's unable to comment in the chat, so I'm going to allow her mic.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. Thank you.
April, I think you should be able to speak now.
I think Rachel, oh, sorry, yeah, go for it, April.
Yes. I don't have any questions. I was just wondering if there was a way to view the chat that I wasn't seeing.
I gotcha.
Somebody would be like, hey, what's going on? But that's all. I was just wondering if I was missing something. I'm not used to working on Microsoft Teams. So that's it. All right, I'll mute myself.
Thank you very much.
And Rachel Allen also has her hand raised. She also has a couple of comments in the chat, but I will.
Yeah, I'll unmute Rachel and then allow her to unmute. Sounds great. Rachel, you should be able to. Yeah.
Yes,
Hi.
I'll add some color to what I put in the chat. But
Sure.
my question about the state road to county control, I'm just wondering, I asked about what that looks like, how long it takes, what approvals are needed. Is there a precedent for that in Montgomery County? Is there an example of a successful transition of oversight of a state road to county control in the past? That's another piece I'm curious about.
Yeah, so Dave may be able to expand upon this a bit further, but ostensibly what has happened in the past is that the county and the state have traded roads based on how different projects have shaken out, like the Purple Line, for instance. I think what we're recommending here is sort of a more wholesale transfer of roadway miles. So I think we're talking about something very, very different and very new. And I think the mechanism is not necessarily fully worked out yet, or worked out at all, to be perfectly honest. But the intent of this recommendation is to recognize that there's a problem and really start the conversation to creating that change, to giving us as a county the flexibility, and the accountability, frankly, that having all of these roads under county control would allow. I think people, I think we have at least one or two DOT staff on the call as well, but I think what happens a lot, and what we're confronted with as a planning department, and as I think a Department of Transportation as well, is there are a lot of roads that people have issues with, or locations where there are problems, and we have to say, oh, that's a state road, so it's like not necessarily in our control, and then we end up connecting you with somebody at the state, I think, which is very unsatisfying for residents and for community members, but it's also really unsatisfying, I think, for me personally, and I think for my colleagues as well. So really creating a better accountability structure for the roads within Montgomery County should really help us get more flexibility and create change faster that we need, and then also really maintain and enhance the accountability and help us achieve Vision Zero. But I think we're under no illusions that this is like an easy thing to do, or will be a quick thing. But we think it's an important thing to consider as a county as we move forward in improving the pedestrian experience.
Thanks for that answer. If it's okay for me to just follow up on one point, which is that
Sure.
I think that obviously that would be a great way forward. I live by Georgia Avenue, so I have a vested interest in this. But I would also say I'd be curious for the plan to explore other opportunities, such as shared oversight, joint oversight, where there's like an owner operator kind of agreement, or even just some kind of, special zone, something like that. I would just urge some creativity around that, because I do think that that is a key issue in the county. So that wholesale, transition would be great, but if that doesn't work out, maybe thinking through a couple other pathways to success, I think could be helpful, just to make sure that there is better streets for us.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think those are really great points, and I think as we evolve these recommendations, I think providing that that nuance and the potential measures that we could take as a county, I think would be great. So thank you.
Francie Gilman says, I like Rachel's question about state roads. While I love the idea of having more local control and better local responsiveness, doesn't it depend on our ability to finance this? Huge. And I think, Eli, you did address that. Adam Carlesco asks, is narrowing car rights of way on overgraded streets part of the plan? Many streets are far too wide and discourage walking.
Yeah, I'd say one element I touched on but didn't really dive into is I think we are very fortunate in this county to have what's called a complete streets design guide. And that document was a collaboration between the planning department and the Department of Transportation, and it really lays out a vision for our roadways as we move forward with them. So as we reconstruct them, as we redesign them, and that document lays out things like appropriate width of lanes, appropriate number of lanes, appropriate sidewalk width, buffer width, all of the dimensions of the roadway that really impact both your crossing experience as a pedestrian and then also your experience traveling along these streets. So that document is very progressive and very pedestrian friendly, and I think it's really a testament to the collaborative spirit that it was created in with us and with DOT. So yeah, I think short answer, yes. There is an effort underway to use those standards as we move forward to reimagine our streets and provide more space for pedestrians, reduce crossing distances, et cetera, as part of that plan, which is wholly supportive of the pedestrian master plan.
Okay, Adam also asks, in regards to the commercial driver's license recommendations, is this something that would be done by Montgomery County or at the state level? And then what class of trucks would be included?
Yeah, so this would be a state level thing. I think there are a number of recommendations, including there's a funding recommendation about vehicle registration fees that would be at the state level at sort of with MVA. So sort of the mechanism for doing that would be working with the legislative delegation for Montgomery County to sort of advance that and build a coalition for that. I'm not totally sure. Again, this is not quite as, I think, big picture as maybe the state highway thing, but the mechanism for doing that or like what the cutoff would be, I don't think we've necessarily hashed out yet, but ostensibly today to require a commercial driver's license requires driving either hazardous waste or something like that or a tractor trailer. So I think what this recommendation really sets out to recognize is that there's a big difference between like a sedan and a tractor trailer, and all of the vehicles between those you can use a normal driver's license to operate, and it doesn't make a ton of sense. And if we were sort of creating the licensing system today from scratch, it's probably not how we would approach it. So yeah, I think that's sort of the beginning of a conversation as well at the state level, working with our delegation to push that along.
Thank you. Tina Slater asks, does vehicle speed play a role in the pedestrian master plan? She supports automated speed cameras as they would help to slow down vehicles.
Yes. So I think initially we had recommendations in the funding section to, I can jump to that section actually. Just make F1C is about sort of right sizing the automated traffic enforcement program. So the fine structure is comparable to surrounding jurisdictions, and then using that money to fund pedestrian bicycle improvements. I think that's something we're still interested in doing, but we have gotten some feedback from other people, which I think is 100% correct, that the purpose of automated traffic enforcement should not be revenue generation. It should be to improve safety. So that's not really obviously a very long-term funding strategy for bicycle pedestrian infrastructure, because ideally traffic violations would go down. But I think coupling this with sort of more widespread automated traffic enforcement is something this plan is interested in doing for the reasons I think, Tina, that you identified. That just the impact, the relationship between vehicle speed and safety, and then other things like red light cameras and other elements of sort of the pedestrian crossing experience, the pedestrian travel experience that could benefit from an automated enforcement approach. So, thank you.
Sharon Canavan says, Four Corners is an intersection of state and county roads. I think it's actually, they're both numbered highways, so they're both state roads. And asks, how will that be treated? Eli, I assume that's in relation to the recommendation about assuming control of state highways.
Yeah, and I think I think it depends how that conversation evolves. But I think the intersection of a county road and a state road today is a conversation about. It depends on the context of the specific situation, and I think outside of the downtowns, town centers, and bus rapid transit corridors, where we would seek to assume county control, I think that conversation would continue. Based on sort of the context. But yeah.
Thank you. Matthew Robertson comments, from personal experience, dealing with SHA is completely opaque. Adam Carlesco says the county's open streets program is fantastic. He recommends that there should be a walkable town center in each of the county's hubs, and asks, are there any plans for these car-free plazas, such as Rockville Town Center and the Bethesda Streetery?
That's we have not. I think we have some recommendations in the plan about shared streets, or sorry, open streets, and making some of the parks open streets permanent. So along Sligo Creek Parkway, and working with parks to do something along Little Falls Parkway. At this moment, we have not made any recommendations about sort of car-free streets, pedestrian streets, like you've identified. I think we have sort of the area master plans that are responsible for some of these more like town centers and downtown areas, have made these recommendations, like the recently approved and adopted Silver Spring and adjacent communities plan, called out Newell Street, for instance, to be a future shared street. So I think as we do these small area plans, there are really great opportunities to create some of these spaces that you're talking about on a more permanent basis, but that's not something that we've done at this point at the countywide level.
Thank you, Eli. Matthew Robertson asks, is there any update on the Aspen Hill Greenway pilot that occurred around 2019? I'll just take that and say that is a project of the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. And Matthew, we can put you in contact with the project managers there so that you can get an update. Sharon asks, is one of the pedestrian plan's objectives minimizing or eliminating cut-through traffic?
Not explicitly. I think the plan has recommendations about reducing vehicle speed and improving pedestrian priority over vehicles at crossing locations. Particularly, there's a recommendation about providing raised crossings, so sort of sidewalk level crosswalks to connect sidewalks, so drivers have to slow down when crossing pedestrian space. But I think as a department, I think we really we're very supportive of the idea of a street network and a grid approach. And I think we understand there are ways to sort of reduce speeds while still allowing sort of multiple routing options for all modes.
Thank you. Andrew Bossi, who represents the Director's Office for the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, commented that the County Council will be reviewing updates or changes to the county code to fully implement the Complete Streets Design Guide, and he provides a link to the bills that'll be before the council, and then how to testify if you want to testify on those bills. Miriam asks, how will the Complete Streets Design Guide apply to existing streets? it's great if we stop overbuilding streets, but what about all the overbuilt streets that have already been overbuilt? And
Do you
I can
want to
take
take?
that.
Do you want to take that? Yeah.
Actually,
Sure.
Dave, this is Tanya. Andrew Bossy just added a response to that question to the chat towards the end.
Right. So updates to existing streets can happen through a few processes. One, new developments may update streets. Two, programs could potentially update streets as well. But he notes most aren't really funded nor scoped for massive capital work. Or three, they need to be funded as their own capital projects to reconstruct the streetscape. So in general, the Complete Streets Guide sets a vision for how streets should be constructed and reconstructed over time. Of course, we have several thousand miles of road in the county, and I think there'll be prioritization of implementing these changes over time. And Andrew's noted a couple of ways that can occur.
Yeah, I think it can be frustrating. I am frustrated that it's going to take a long time. As a county, we have thousands of miles of roads to really get to the place we may want to be when it comes to pedestrian comfort, pedestrian connectivity, transit, all of these sort of the walkability that we want as a county. And I think that definitely can be frustrating, but I think the recommendations in this plan and the collaboration that the planning department and MCDOT have had on things like the Complete Streets Design Guide, I think are really important sort of cultural things and sort of high level policy things that will get us in the right direction.
Okay, Adam Carlesco asks, what is the plan for Veers Mill? There's no easy direct route to get between Wheaton and Rockville safely outside of driving a car, so I can take that one. So the county council approved the Veers Mill Corridor Master Plan, and I'll put that in the chat in a moment, a link to that. That was approved in 2019. And so that sets a new vision for the Veers Mill Corridor, at least the portion within the Montgomery County Planning Department's purview from Twin Brook Parkway to Wheaton. And so that envisions a corridor with continuous sidewalks and bikeways on both sides of the road. And Adam, we can email you with some contacts about implementation of the plan, but Montgomery County Department of Transportation has under design sidewalks and bikeways along large segments of the road. So we'll get that contact to you. And then Eli Matthew Robinson asks, can you talk to some of the options on the table for improving pedestrian shading?
Yeah, I think we have a couple of recommendations about this, and they're really, I think, a jumping off point. I think what we noticed in the existing conditions report is that sidewalk shading across the county is generally not that good, but it's worse in our equity focus areas. So areas of the county with lower English proficiency and more sort of Black and brown people. And what I think we'd like to do is develop a plan to improve shading along these sidewalks in these communities, and then also create a new capital improvement program project that plants and maintains new street trees, especially in areas with poor canopy coverage. So I think the approach here is to identify the priorities for where shade is really essential, and then to really step up our funding of these programs that both plant street trees and then maintain them. I think if you're familiar with the street tree program in Washington, D.C., it's very easy to get a street tree planted in front of your house, in the public right of way, so between the sidewalk and the street. And that type of program does not really exist in Montgomery County. You can get trees planted on your property, but not sort of in the public right of way in that landscape buffer. So I think trees are part of it. I think these recommendations speak to trees in B6B, but I think more broadly, there are opportunities to improve shade along sidewalks by just using good urban design, having buildings that address the street, having buildings that you don't need to walk through a parking lot to access. Anytime you can have a building provide shade, I think of a sidewalk, I think that's a really good opportunity as well. So trees, using sort of urban design to shade sidewalks. And I think there are a lot of other creative ideas that I think we've seen across the country, including sort of like solar sails and different like more artificial ways to shade the sidewalk as well, that tend to be more common at transit stops and things like that, where people are waiting in a stationary location for a while.
Eli, can I just add to that? This is Tanya Stern, Deputy Planning Director, for those of you who joined after we started. The county's climate action plan, which was completed in 2021, that our department helped support its development and current implementation, also really focuses on expanding the county's tree canopy, which would include, shading for areas where pedestrians travel, as part of a strategy to reduce heat island effect throughout the county. And so there's a number of recommendations related to that. And so that's another area where the county is really focused through some other initiatives outside the pedestrian master plan to try to increase shading for pedestrians. So I just wanted to let folks know that as well. This is an example, like with the Complete Streets Design Guide, where the pedestrian master plan complements and works hand in hand with another, important plan that we've completed in the county.
Thanks, Tanya. Alfred asks, wouldn't strong speed control and automated ticketing, as well as red light cameras, be a high priority under the protect theme rather than a more minor item under funding? And he's suggesting Shady Grove Road, which is the Vision Zero high injury network corridor. It has pedestrian crosswalks on it and a posted speed limit of 40 miles per hour, which is, he says, often not obeyed.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Alfred. I think as we continue to evolve these recommendations, I definitely see automated traffic enforcement moving to a more prominent place in the protect section as one of the tools that we have available to slow speeds, improve compliance with crosswalk yielding and traffic signals and things like that. So I think you're absolutely right on.
And going back a bit, Miriam had a follow-up question where she's asking about what happens with overbuilt streets. And then Sharon says, as a follow-up to the same question, she indicates that Four Corners represents unique challenges. There's two intersecting higher speed highways, of course, the Beltway interchanges that feed in there, multiple traffic lights, etc. It's very complicated. And it's a pedestrian nightmare. So she asks, does the pedestrian master plan present solutions for such complex intersections?
So the answer, I guess, the short answer is no. But I think what we're trying to do with the pedestrian prioritization tool and with other sort of policy tools like the Complete Streets Design Guide is sort of create the conditions where those really complicated, very unique situations and challenges can be resolved collaboratively with the planning department, with the Department of Transportation, and with the State Highway Administration. So I think what we're trying to do is lay out standards that when the Four Corners area is considered for sort of a comprehensive redesign with an emphasis on pedestrian safety, transit access, and things like that. we have really progressive, really pedestrian forward standards and guidance in place, so that redesign can happen in a way that leads to the outcomes that we all want to see. So this plan and most master plans actually tend not to make very specific targeted recommendations about specific sort of transportation things. And because this is a countywide plan and we don't necessarily have the sort of latitude or bandwidth to do that. But I think this plan and the sort of associated efforts like the design guide have really laid the groundwork for looking at Four Corners, looking at our overbuilt roads in general, with fresh eyes and with an opportunity to really dramatically improve the pedestrian experience along those roads.
Well, that was the last question. Does anyone else either raise their hand or add a question in the chat? Okay, Francie Gilman says, I think there's a no turn on red recommendation for urban areas. Is it likely to be adopted? Is it up to the county council? And if it is adopted, how will it be enforced?
That's a very good multi-part question. There is a recommendation to increase the use of no turn on red in urban areas. I think the logic there is that allowing turns on red, even if there's no potential conflict with through vehicles, creates a conflict obviously with pedestrians that have the right of way in the crosswalk. And while pedestrians who may be able to see turning vehicles turning on red may be able to avoid them. Obviously, pedestrians travel across Montgomery County every day who have low or no vision and aren't really able to successfully negotiate that conflict. So that's a recommendation to really just enhance pedestrian priority and pedestrian safety at these urban intersections. Is it likely to be adopted, or is it up to county council? I think it could be up to county council, but I think what we've seen is that the Department of Transportation has a lot of latitude when it comes to how they sign and mark the transportation system. So this recommendation could be implemented through sort of changing policy in the Department of Transportation, which could come from a grassroots level there, or it could sort of be encouraged by council action or something like that. And on the enforcement piece of it, I think that's tied, I think, to the ongoing conversation we've had today and in the county as a whole about automated enforcement and looking at using automated enforcement beyond just speeding to include other types of sort of traffic infractions that cause safety issues like this one. So I think there's a place for that. And then there's also probably a place, obviously, for increased education, and then for more effective signing and marking of no turn on red, and really encouraging people to obey traffic laws in general. So very good question. Thank you.
That was the last question we had.
If that's all, definitely 100% feel free to send me an email if anything else comes up, or you have any other thoughts on the draft recommendations or on the prioritization tool itself. If you'd like to keep up to date with this plan, Dave can probably post this in the chat too, but we have an e-letter that we regularly send out updates on where we are in the plan. Some sort of future updates on that will be when the feedback we get from the planning board about these recommendations. It'll be an opportunity to sign up to testify in front of the planning board about the pedestrian plan and support or against, what have you. And then additional updates along the way as well. So I'd encourage you to sign up for that, which is on our website. And Dave has posted the direct link in the chat as well. And our website, again, if you don't have access to the chat, is montgomeryplanning.org/walking here. And my email is eli.glazier@montgomeryplanning.org. So this has been really fun. I really appreciated your thoughtful questions and comments. And if you have any follow-ups, definitely reach out to me. And I look forward to hearing from you. So
Eli,
really appreciate it. Yeah.
If
Go
you
for
could,
it.
before you fully close, if you could just highlight again, kind of next steps and where we are in the overall process in terms of these being for some people who may have joined late, these being the draft recommendations, we're bringing these to the board, and these will then be part of a draft plan.
Yeah. So I think this is frequently been referred to as the plan. This is a set of recommendations that are part of a larger plan, and that plan document is about to begin being written by me. And that process will take through the end of this year, like I said before, if you join late. And then the work sessions on this plan will begin with the planning board in early 2023. So those work sessions are an opportunity for the board to break down piece by piece what's being recommended, what the existing conditions are, and they can identify changes they'd like to make before they ultimately sort of give their seal of approval, and it moves on to a similar process at the county council. So we're looking essentially for the rest of this year to do all of the staff work around this plan. And then in the new year, we'll begin the planning board process that all master plans go through, and then the county council process after that all master plans go to as well. So
Eli, if you could mention the presentation to the planning board that will take place later this month, if anyone wants to watch that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We are presenting a very similar presentation to this to the planning board on September 22nd. I believe you can also, there'll be an opportunity to sign up to speak at that meeting if you'd like. At that meeting, we'll just be sharing very similarly with the board and getting their feedback so we can continue to evolve these recommendations in response to their feedback and in response to the community feedback that we've already gotten and we hope to continue to get. So, yeah.
And just really quickly for the planning board, any of you who haven't participated, you can attend planning board meetings in person or virtually as well. You could either watch the live stream, or if you do sign up to testify, you can again come in person, or you can request to testify virtually through Microsoft Teams. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Thank you so much. But yeah, have a great night. And please connect with me if you have any questions or comments about the plan. Really appreciate it again. And thanks to my colleagues for joining today as well. So take care. Have a good night.